What the heck is up, everyone? Welcome to this Victory Monday edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast, but not just any Victory Monday. The NFC North champion, number one overall seed, home field advantage, bye in the first week of the playoffs. Your Green Bay Packers. There is a lot to celebrate in this game. And oh, by the way, just another victory over the Chicago Bears in a very meaningful game. Once again, it didn't knock the Bears out of the playoffs. They were able to back their way in based off of a Arizona Cardinals loss at the hands of John Wofford, but we're not going to discuss that in great detail today because there is a lot of Packers stuff to talk about. Welcome in, as always, for those of you who don't know me. My name is Andy Herman. I am a writer and editor for Packer Report. I do a variety of other things as well. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL, but I am jacked up. I am excited to talk about this Packers victory over the Chicago Bears. First of all, I want to talk about how important to me this number one seed is. And I know I'm not breaking news here. I know you know how important this number one seed is, but for the Packers specifically, to have home field advantage, go through Lambeau Field, to have the bye, and specifically for a team that hasn't had a bye since week 5 in the season, this is something that comes at just the right time. I know, Bakhtiari's hurt. He's not coming back. I'm not sure that they have a bunch of other injuries and players who may come back. Maybe a Tyler Ervin, maybe a Raven Green, maybe they had a couple nicks or bumps and bruises from this past game that need to, kind of clear up. But overall, it's not like they're an exceedingly, injured team at the moment. Kingsley Keke was out as well. But overall, it's a relatively healthy team, at least as far as we know, going into the playoffs. But still, the wear and tear of a 16-game season when you haven't had a bye for that long, that bye week for Green Bay is huge. And then just being able to sit back and watch as these 6 remaining NFC teams tee off on one another in this wild card weekend, especially with the expanded wild card. I think all 3 games in the NFC have the opportunity of being good games. I think Washington can keep things close against Tampa, closer than maybe teams think. Brady struggles with pressure, and Washington's front 4 is no joke whatsoever and can consistently get pressure. I know Tampa's O-line is good, but I think that's going to be an interesting game. New Orleans and Chicago, I think New Orleans probably handles that, but with, dependent upon how their players come back from COVID and their running back situation, what Mike Thomas's injury status is, and just, how close to 100% he is, that game could be interesting. Seattle, LA, that'll be very dependent upon Jared Goff, but just watching all those teams have to go up against each other in a playoff atmosphere and beat up on one another, and then, potentially go on a short week. We don't know if Green Bay will play on Saturday or Sunday the following week, but, some of those teams may play on Sunday and then have to follow up in Green Bay on Saturday. Even if it's Saturday to Sunday, still have, Green Bay having that bye, whereas the other team is going to have to, play the week before. Just a huge advantage for Green Bay. And I can't emphasize this enough. I think there's a legitimate chance that this victory against the Bears was the difference between the Packers being a Super Bowl contender or not. I think it would have been increasingly difficult to have to, play a game. Likely it would have been at home against LA. If Jared Goff is healthy, that's a very tough game to open things up. Even if Green Bay wins that, they would have been the number 3 seed. So they would have went on the road, likely to either New Orleans or Seattle, and then probably would have faced either New Orleans, Seattle, or Tampa Bay in that NFC Championship game after that. That would have been a really tough stretch of games, likely with 2 of them, being on the road. So the difference between that 3 games with 2 on the road against tough opponents versus, 2 games at home with a bye in the middle, I know you guys know the importance of it. And again, I know I'm not breaking any news here, but I legitimately believe, without being hyperbolic, that this is the difference between the Packers going to the Super Bowl and, being on the outside looking in, potentially, and in all seriousness, I think there's a huge difference here. So we'll see just how much it matters. But I think this was a major win and a major victory for the Packers to secure the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. And to me, becoming really one of the Super Bowl favorites as we head in to the playoffs. Let's talk a little bit more about this game for Green Bay, though, because there was a lot that happened. This was kind of your classic Packers 2020 game where, there's moments of brilliance. There's kind of a little bit of a lull at some point. They've had their lulls at different points. Usually it comes, you're early to start, the second half, or maybe to end the second half. It usually comes somewhere in there. And then when you still look at the final score, you're like, oh, they still won by double digits and rather comfortably. And that was kind of the same story here. It was interesting because they had the lead at halftime and really had the opportunity to cement things with the touchdown to MVS, who ultimately dropped it. That would have been, to me, a early third quarter dagger against Chicago in that game. Instead, with the drop, they end up going punt. Bears get a field goal. They go 3 and out. And all of a sudden, the Bears have the ball with an opportunity to take a lead with a touchdown with about 12 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter, which would have changed things entirely. They had the ball 4th and 1 on the Packers 25-yard line, and they were 4 for 4 at that point in converting those fourth down conversions. And what happens? They, instead of running up the middle or QB sneak, which had been successful up until that point, they roll out Mitch Trubisky. It looks like, which would just be chef kiss, it looks like Jimmy Graham maybe either ran the wrong route or didn't know what was going on. It definitely looked disjointed at best. And ultimately, Mitch Trubisky throws a pass. Chandon Sullivan had the opportunity to intercept it. May have been better that he didn't, because they got the ball turnover on downs anyway, which probably would have been better field position. But either way, it's a turnover on downs. And then Green Bay goes on a 12-play, 80-some yard drive, 75-yard drive, one of those two, and really kind of cements the game. And then it was a Trubisky pick and another touchdown, and all of a sudden you've got this 35-16 victory. But it really, those two drives back to back, the fourth down conversion that failed for the Bears, followed by a 12-play drive for the Packers that resulted in 7 points. That was really the key in the second half for turning this game around. Not turning it around, but putting it out of reach for Green Bay. You kind of had this feeling that Mitch was going to throw a key interception at some point. He had flirted with a couple. Kevin King dropped the interception in the back of the end zone. Chandon Sullivan had dropped one. There had been a couple opportunities, but just couldn't come up with it. It looked like Jair had one where if maybe instead of going for the player, he went for the ball, he would have had an opportunity for a pick. And then finally, Adrian Amos comes up with it. So I thought that was, that 2-drive stretch was a real huge key in this game. I thought the other one was just red zone, right? So, turnovers are always huge, and then red zone performance always huge as well. The Bears had 5 opportunities in the red zone. They converted their first one for a touchdown. Their next 3 go for field goals, and then they ran out of time at the end of the game, and basically garbage time. Even if they scored there, it certainly would not have mattered. But they end up with 5 drives ending in 16 points. And as I've said on here before, I always measure it that, at minimum, you're looking that they should get 15 points in 5 drives. Like that's a minimum by kicking 3 field goals. So if you told me the Bears were going to have 5 drives in the red zone, I would say, all right, I want to be as close to 15 points as possible. Anything better than that is phenomenal. Anything right at or around that is great. If you can keep them somewhere around there, you're probably going to have a fairly good day defensively. And they held them to 16 points on 5 drives into the red zone. So a huge performance by the Packers defense in that regards. And really, if you look at those 16 points, 3 of them were directly result of the fumble by Tavon Austin. And really, they deserve credit for holding the Bears to 3 points in that situation. So you can really only put 13 total points on the Packers defense in this game. And it's one of those games where it's a little bit weird because the at one point, I think they had the ball for 61 plays of offense, where the Packers had it for 29. So it's this very disjointing effect where you see the Packers barely having the ball and the Bears constantly with the ball and converting, third downs and fourth downs. And it feels like this, this game that the Bears are at times, I don't want to say dominating, but doing really well at offensively. But when you go and look at it and see how Green Bay managed this game, it came down to how they performed in the red zone, and the Packers defense was fantastic in that regards. And anytime you limit a team to 16 or what I would call 13 points allowed for the defense, that is a huge win, because Green Bay is going to score 14 more often than not. In this game, they obviously needed 17 because of the special teams, but Green Bay is going to score. They scored 30 in 12 out of 16 games this year. So if you're limiting the opposing team to 16 points, even if 3 of them are due to the special teams, you're more than doing your job, and Green Bay is going to win the vast majority of those games. And then obviously on the flip side, the Packers red zone offense goes 4 for 4, scores touchdowns on all 4 of their drives, even on the second one, which they get behind the chains due to a holding penalty by Billy Turner. They make it up in 2 plays and get the touchdown to Dominique Daphne. So just another extremely, extremely efficient day for the Packers offense. And then in the red zone, they were, again, perfect. And then you had the deep ball to MVS to cap things off in a 35-point overall game. So red zone was the big difference here. Turnovers played a part. Green Bay got 2, had the 1 fumble by Tavon Austin. My players of the game were Aaron Jones and Adrian Amos. Just off first glance, I thought Aaron Jones got a ton of yardage that wasn't necessarily there or blocked for him. Great cuts where, he had a couple backside cuts, just displayed great vision, couple stiff arms, just running really hard throughout the day, both on the ground and through the air. I think he only ended up with 80 some yards total on the day, but I think a lesser back ends up with like 30 or 40 yards given those same situations. Just really impressed how he handled that game. And of course, another touchdown for Aaron Jones as well. Then Adrian Amos, had the forced fumble that got called back, unfortunately, due to an offsides penalty, an interception late in the game. There was one play where I think it was Montgomery broke like 3 tackles, and then Amos came in and just, leveled them. And it was either him. Actually, I think it was Darnell Mooney, now that I think of it, because I think Mooney went out on that play, and Amos just leveled him. So he was all over the ball once again. And as I've said, these safeties, Savage had the one play where he got beat by Mooney over the top, but outside of that, I thought the safeties, and especially Adrian Amos in this game, again, all over the place. And tip of the cap to the offensive line in this game as well, especially first game without David Bakhtiari. I know they played without him earlier this season, but wasn't perfect. Allowed a couple of pressures, I think a sack or 2, and then I don't think it was the most efficient running game in the world, but overall, first game against a really tough Bears defensive line. Akeem Hicks was active, unlike the last time they played. Khalil Mack had a nice game, so I thought this was a really nice game overall, all things considered, for the offensive line, and can be used as a building block as they go into the playoffs. Also, I think you just have to say this may have been best case scenario if you're a Packers fan for the Chicago Bears. They go 8-8 on the season. They don't really look that great, but you keep them as far away from as possible from that rebuild. There's probably not going to be any of the top quarterbacks that make it to them, especially now that they made the playoffs. They backed their way into the playoffs based on a loss to Arizona. Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, maybe even Mitch Trubisky may all keep their jobs. And maybe I'm a bit premature here, and maybe they make a run in the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe it'd be a little bit sweeter if they didn't get in the playoffs. But overall, you have to be kind of excited about this overall season for the Bears, because right now, they are stuck in mediocrity, and that is the best place that you want your division rivals to be in. Even Minnesota picking up a win. I think they end up with the 14th pick in the draft. Probably not going to get that franchise quarterback. Maybe, maybe Trey Lance is there or something like that, but it'll be really interesting to see. And I have a better feeling that the Lions will blow the number 7 pick than maybe if it was switched and the Vikings ended up with a worse record. So not a bad way to end the season for the NFC North. A couple other notes, injuries. Shannon Sullivan, Tyler Lancaster both went out but returned. Chris Barnes went out, returned, went out, returned. And then in the last couple drives when they were in dime defense was not out there, which he normally would be. So that's one injury to kind of keep an eye on as the injury report comes out, not this week, but next week. So that'll be worth noting. Matt LaFleur in this game guaranteed that through 2 seasons he will not lose 2 games in a row. Theoretically, going into this game, they could have lost to the Bears and then their first playoff game, so that would have been the only way. But now that they won against the Bears, there is no way for him to lose 2 games in a row for the second straight season, which is a ridiculous statistic. 26-6 and 27-7 overall in his first 2 seasons and counting. Hopefully he's got 3 more wins to get that to 30-7, which is insane. But he's had a hell of a start and no 2 losses in a row through his first 2 seasons. Also, just really quickly on MVS. This is who MVS is. He's a wild card. You take the highs with the lows. I get that people are frustrated with the drops. He had another huge touchdown play, a nice conversion on like a 15-yard reception. Overall, what you have to realize is he's still easily the best number 3 wide receiver on this team right now. There's a drop off after him to Malik Taylor, Tavon Austin, Equinemius St. Brown. He's clearly the number 3. He's definitely behind, Allen Lazard and obviously Devontae Adams. But what he does without the ball as both a blocker and really as a decoy down the field, taking 2 defenders with him on on a variety of different occasions because teams have to respect his deep speed. He provides a ton of value to the team, even with some of these drops here and there. So the fact that he's providing some of the huge explosive plays with some of the little, plays like the blocking and the occupying two defenders, that adds a ton of value, even if he comes up with some of those heartbreaking plays. Of course, what's next? Green Bay will have a bye. They'll face the lower seed remaining in the divisional round, either either Tampa Bay, Washington, the Rams, or the Bears. So whoever has the remaining lowest seed, Green Bay will face in the divisional round. That's going to do it for me. Make sure to check out myself, Alex Strofe, and Perry Goldstein, wherever you get your favorite audio podcasts. I'll be right back here tomorrow on a brand new edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go, number 1 seed. See you tomorrow.